Hey, Nobles, you're my hero.
It's always great to start off a meeting like that. I don't even know what for, but it works.
Well, I hadn't looked at anything yesterday, and then like Patch popped up, and it was Nobles Crawford all over it.
Oh, that. Oh, yeah, my official capacity. Yeah. There's no time for ignorance.
You were the first one to speak, so that was great. I was very
yeah,
proud of you.
That might get me in trouble next year for my re-election, but we'll see.
I hope not.
Even if it does, it was the right thing to do.
Yep. I mean, you're always my hero for other reasons, but yesterday that was the reason.
Well, the feeling's mutual, Sally, and you're actually going to hear a little bit of why when I do the Parks and Rec, the Parks and Cultural Affairs budget analysis here. Oh, Catherine, this is a Catherine meeting. Here we go.
Oh, it's that kind of budget hearing.
Well, you know, if it's me, I always bring the vibes.
So, Catherine, I have a change to the agenda.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna wait for some folks to
Great.
So we have a little bit more attendance, just so we can kind of go over, but that's fine.
Yeah, if that agenda change doesn't include grooving right now, I don't want to hear it.
Well, I will, just to preview, this is a public hearing and there's no public session, which has never happened in a public hearing that I'm aware of. We need a chance for the public to comment.
Wait till we start, Sally.
Yeah, I was going to address that.
And on that, the music is over.
Pump the brakes.
Sally, you're killing the buzz.
It's all good, Sally. Sally is vigilant. I appreciate that. And I have a response for that. When I was going to get started, I was going to address that. 6. All right, we have so far 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, let's give it till about 6:35. I'll put the music back on. That way we can have more attendees and more members coming on. Okay, let's 6:35. We have a good number of members on here. I know folks. Okay. Uh, I know folks are going to continue to trickle in, and hopefully more community members who are non-board members will continue to trickle in. I'm going to share the preliminary screen. Sally raised a really great point, which is that there isn't a separate public session listed on the agenda. And so the reason for that being was that the list came in pretty late today, just because things were delayed in getting them into the board office. And so the idea is that every chair is able to speak to their items, speak to the discussions that they've been having, and we will be taking hands from the public. So that way, because the public hasn't been able to see the list that's been compiled, I'm going to share it on the screen today. Folks are able to chime in on that. So the entire meeting will be open for public participation, not just, a 10-minute thing. I know some people may have to hop on, hop off, whether you're from the public or not. And so we're definitely going to be maximizing the Q&A. So I'll share a little bit about that. So I see Wayne's hand is up before I share the screen. So go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, this is a public hearing, so we don't need a public session for a public hearing. The purpose of a public hearing is to obtain public comments. And so the chairs typically briefly, and I did say briefly, outline the items that are, in their committee's area. But, the members of the public don't necessarily have to just comment on those, although they're fine. If you're a CBO or a school, a resident, you can also bring to the board's attention what your concerns are. So, the whole purpose of a public hearing is, exactly that, to get public input.
Right, and I'm also going to have the slides that can that also share that and state that clearly. So let's get started. I hope everyone can see screen. Okay. And I know, so from folks who have been part of this process before, this may seem a little bit redundant. But we have many new board members. I think some of us also, right, we come back from break, maybe didn't participate last year. So it's always good that we always have like a baseline on what our board process is. And so just to kind of quickly highlight, particularly for members who are not on the community board, but are watching from CBOs, individuals, as Wayne suggested, we definitely want to maximize the Q&A, especially if you can't stay on for the entire time. So use the Q&A if you have, you have to hop off, but you want to make sure that we know there's an item that's important to you. Use the Q&A if you have questions. Committee chairs are also going to be watching that and will be able to respond. So we want to be able to have the maximum engagement as possible. And of course, please raise your hand. I'm going to be taking a look, and I'll also be asking for support on that for members of the public to raise your hand. And we're going to use the same kind of guidelines from our general meeting, which is 2 minutes for folks to speak and share. And again, these are questions that you can raise for committee chairs, or this might be, we're talking about parks. There's something you see that's not there that's really important to you. And that's definitely the time to share as well. All right. So what is this annual hearing that takes place? So community board in itself is an advisory board for the city mandated by the charter. And so throughout the year, we have plenty of meetings where we, discuss community issues and needs, receive presentations. And so oftentimes city agencies are sitting in our committee meetings and talking about their needs as well, right? And so this happens out throughout the entire year. This is a formal process. Not something that CB12 just decided to do, but something that takes place all the time to make sure that community input is given into the formation of the city budget, right? Last year is about a $90 billion budget. And every time we have an opportunity to say what our district needs are and make sure that that's included in the budget and that gets allocated appropriately. And so that's the reason why we're having today's hearing. I wanted to kind of discuss what the funding looks like, right? And so our funding requests fall into two categories: expense items and capital items. And expenses are basically covering day-to-day operations of different city agencies, right? This is programming, this might be supplies, salaries. So for example, if you want to see more bins or more compost programs in the community, that would fall under expense. Capital requests include major equipment, physical improvements to our public lands. So you often see, sewer replacements, any major changes, particularly to playgrounds, as we saw the beginning of today, and fall under those. And I now highlight as well, this is for city funding, right? So not in anything that's federal or at the state level. And I wanted to kind of highlight too, because I think I've been on the board for about 6 years, and it was really nice to kind of think through how this process works, right? So as I said, if maybe this is your first time or your like 100th time at a community board meeting, throughout the entire year, we're discussing what our community's needs are. It could be October or it could be February. And if there's a city agency sitting in our meeting and we're problem solving on an issue, they might often say, and they will bring up, it would be nice to be able to solve that if we had funding allocated for X, right? And so, for example, in my experience on the Public Safety Committee, the NYPD, I remember, would say, well, if we had more lighting or if we were able to get one of the watch units on this driveway, and this was in February, that would be really helpful. So the meetings throughout the year, we're taking notes of what the patterns are and what's needed, right? And this is both from city agencies, but also, of course, residents who live in the area and attend our meetings. And so that happens throughout the year, October to June. In September, as soon as we start discussing and establishing what our budget requests will be. And so we create a really long list in every single committee on what we want to see funded for the following fiscal year. And come October, AKA this month now, today, is when we're voting on finalizing what that list looks like. And so the formal process, as I said, which is stage 3 on the screen, you don't have to read it all, it might be a little small, and I apologize for that, is for formal input, right? So there might be, maybe you didn't attend committee meetings, maybe things changed. This is the opportunity for members of the public to be able to share that. After that, and after tonight, board members rank and submit their from highest to lowest priority items for funding. And we submit that to the board office. Our district manager, following that, will submit that to the Office of Management and Budget, which you will often hear as OMB, by the end of October. So essentially in about a week, we have to submit to the city what our final list and requests are. And in the next year, we actually do hear back from OMB on what the status of the requests are. And that comes with feedback as well. So if they didn't fund something, they give a brief explanation as to why. And that also helps us in our committee work to be able to evaluate what might be other opportunities or discuss with city agencies. I should also add, it doesn't happen just at the committee level meeting. There's monthly meetings that our district manager runs, which is the district service cabinet. And there's often a lot of conversations around funding there. So that's just a quick explanation as to what that's like. I'm gonna just kind of stop there. If there's any questions, particularly from board members on what we're doing tonight, or members of the public, like I said, feel free to drop it in the Q&A as well. Okay, Maria Luna, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. We are going to be voting today. We are ranking tonight, or are we going to submit that to the office later? How is going to do that here?
So thank you, Maria. So we are actually not going to be voting on it tonight. Last year, we had an amazing opportunity to test drive SurveyMonkey, but because of the timing of when the office received all of the lists, it just made it impossible to put it together. So we're gonna hear the presentation. If there's any new items, we're gonna have a final list. And then that's going to be, it's already in our inbox. So after tonight, folks can submit it, and it's gonna be due by Monday, end of day. So that gives time. If you can't print it, you can stop by the office tomorrow to pick up a copy. And I'll repeat that again at the end as well. All right, so let's just get to it. We're gonna start listening in to, okay, go ahead, Wayne.
So just to clarify, so It's due by Monday, but we're not doing it by SurveyMonkey. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way on paper.
Yes, we're doing it paper-based or Excel
Okay.
on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah. Next time, though, I'm always a proponent for using tech when we can. All right, so I'm gonna, because some folks may not have gotten to see it, I'm gonna share it on the screen. We're gonna start with Parks and Cultural Affairs. Some folks have more items than others, so I'm saying 3 minutes per committee. Some folks might need 5, understandable. And then if you can please start with, we're gonna start with capital items since it's the first tab, and then expense. So Nobles will be speaking on behalf of Parks and Cultural tonight.
And real quick, did you say we have 5 minutes here? Just to make sure I'm good with the time.
Yes, I'll give you 5.
Okay, cool. Just let me know like whenever I get close and I can start to wrap it up.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much to the office for putting all these materials together, making sure that we have them for this meeting. I know that's no small task, so I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate us going first because I think we do have the most items on these priorities. Now, let me tell you why I think we do. The reason being is because out of every single department there is from a city government perspective, Parks is the only department that does not have an actual like expense budget. All of the money that it's granted basically year to year for expenses comes from our elected officials or the mayor's office. There's no evergreen budget here. That is a problem that hopefully we'll be able to take care of as stewards of this city going forward. But at the same time, that's why it's so vital for new folks here on the community board to understand that Parks and Cultural Affairs' budget here is really the only amount of money that we can say that we can put a flag in to say that we can get. And that's why our list, most of the time we have this conversation, is so long. That being said, when it came to ranking these as a committee, we wanted to make sure as a committee that we hit off on 3 really important pillars when it comes to this budget. First pillar is to always make sure that there are underserved areas of our community that get our attention, get the funding that's needed to be able to help the folks there, especially the youth, thrive in those areas. There's no denying that a good Parks and Cultural Affairs operation and system goes to the full benefit of a community, and it benefits everybody in many different things, from school to crime to legit everything else. So we need to have really good funding for underserved communities in our community board district. Second priority that we had was to make sure, and this is different than any other year, that we are ranking some of these items along the priority of saving our climate and sustainability. This was something that, and albeit to Sally Fisher here in terms of making sure that we stayed on this path, but that was something that all of us really kind of had as the North Star in our mind when we were thinking about this ranking. And the third pillar that we certainly, you could see from the way that we voted, that we kind of all rallied behind, were iconic infrastructure, the ways that we define our neighborhood. And as that pillar, there's a lot of really awesome community defining places that need a lot of help from a refurbishing or renovation perspective. And I'll say that. And so when it comes down to, I think it is expenses first, Catherine, or was it capital first? You want me to say?
Capital.
Capital. Thank you.
Can you see it on the screen?
I can see on the screen. Thank you.
Okay.
So when it comes to our capital expenses, again, like these are more like high ticket, long-term type of projects. This is really where the third pillar kind of came to life when it came to how our committee voted. So iconic infrastructure. The top 5 priorities that we had for this. One was to renovate and really to make ADA compliant the Little Red Lighthouse, which is honestly falling apart if you've been there. That would definitely be a capital project. Next would be path repavings in Fort Tryon that it hasn't had in some time, and it gets a lot of use, that park. Payson Playground and the Park House renovation, that is a huge piece. You know how many kids go to the Payson Playground. My kids certainly do. And so we thought that that was going to be a great place for a capital project, because a lot of other playgrounds in the areas have gotten a lot of shine recently. And now is the time for the Payson Playground. The Hispanic Society, places near and dear to all of our hearts. We wanted to make sure in our top 5 priorities that definitely got enough funding to take care of the roof that they've had issues with, and some of the other pieces of their building that I'm sure Alex Campos can talk to you about ad nauseum. But it's extremely important for the identity of our neighborhood. And then also tried to get ADA compliant bathrooms in the Javits playground. Also a very high traffic playground, services a lot of people from both sides of Broadway, to be quite honest, and not to have bathrooms there, for them to have to go deep into the Javits, into Fort Tryon. It's an underservice of that particular playground and the importance it is to the neighborhood. So those are our top 5 Parks and Cultural Affairs capital priorities. Now, when it comes to expenses, as I was saying before, the Parks Department does not get evergreen expenses. And so the money that I'm about to talk about right now is the only money that they could potentially get next year, unlike any other department in the New York City system. And so when it comes to that, the Playfair budget by a huge amount was #1 priority for Parks and Cultural Affairs. We want to put $25 million into Playfair funding. Now, Playfair funding covers a lot of things, as you can see here on the screen. Gardeners, forestry, green thumb staff, urban park rangers, God knows we love urban park rangers, parks enforcement patrol, and there's just more conservation, again, a part of sustainability and environmental care, more cultural programming for kids. This is an omnibus budget, folks. And since we don't have a budget, an evergreen budget for parks, this is really important. And I would implore you to please have this at the top of your list. Thank you. I'm almost done. I would implore you to have this at the top of your list when we vote moving into next week. But some of the other things that we had, talking about some of our iconic infrastructure, the Native American and African American burial grounds on 212th Street. We want to develop a memorial there. And then also staffing our youth center. We got a lot of kids. I mean, the population in our area is growing, according to the census. So we want to make sure that they are certainly serviced with the right support as they come up. And then also an increase in DCLA funding. That happens, every year as a priority. We want to make sure that we have some solid educational activities for our parks. So folks, thank you for listening to me. Parks are near and dear to all of our hearts, I'm sure of it. Fun stat, our CB12 district has the most park land per capita of any other community board district. That's why it's so important to make sure when you vote on the priorities for these budgets, the parks priorities are up there at the top of your list. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
All right. Are there any members of the public who have questions, suggestions, want to kind of like promote any particular item? All right. I'm going to start with the members of the public first and then board members. So Sky, I have Sky. Let's see.
Hello. I just want to say thank you to the board and to the community board members and to Nobles for that introduction to these expenses, and to really reinforce support for the $25 million Playfair thing. After the attacks in Inwood Hill Park, we had a meeting brought together of over a dozen community groups to talk about safety, accessibility, and use of our Northern Manhattan parks. And a lot of things came up. Urban Park Rangers was at the top of the list as one of the things that will do the most for our parks, and that comes out of that Playfair money. Also, the looking at climate change as top of the agenda is hugely important. So the dedicated forestry and money that goes towards the preservation of our shoreline are really huge priorities for me. So thank you for your time. Keep parks at the top of your list, people, please.
Thanks, Sky.
All right. All right. John's next. I'll unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, this is John Krawchuk from the Historic House Trust of New York City. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to say a few words today with regard to the capital request for the Little Red Lighthouse, which is one of our member properties with the Historic House Trust. The lighthouse sort of shares that honor also with two other sites that are within the community board, the Dyckman Farmhouse, as well as the Morris Jumel mansions. So I just wanted to mention that for context. I didn't know if you wanted me to actually show some images. I'd be happy to do that, or just say a few quick words with regard to the request.
I'd probably say a few quick words. I think we looked at the images in our committee meeting.
Okay, fantastic. And thank you, Nobles, for the early introduction to Little Red. As you noted, the lighthouse is in fairly rough condition. It's very exposed on the Hudson River. The lighthouse is made of cast iron, and that's a very difficult and harsh environment for any metal structure being right on the waterfront. The lighthouse has not really had a fully complete capital restoration project since it was restored in 1951. And it's been on this site since 1921. And as a side note, I'd like to mention that the lighthouse celebrated its 100th anniversary of its installation at this location on October 10th, just a few days ago, 10 days ago. So that's kind of this is a perfect moment for us to actually be looking at what its needs are to get it through the next 40 to 50 years. We're requesting $6.35 million for a full restoration and rehab of the lighthouse, the landscape immediately around it, the foundation on which it sits, and to make it fully ADA accessible. And as part of that, we'd like to update some of the technologies that would really allow it to be a beacon for the future, and to kind of serve as the sort of bellwether for environmental activities. Perhaps we could put a camera upstairs so that those who couldn't get up the staircase could actually experience what that incredible view looks like. But most importantly, the metal itself is starting to significantly deteriorate, and we'd really like to do a full refurbishment for its 100th anniversary. I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, John, for illuminating additional information there. We're going to take, I see two more hands from Maggie and then from a board member. So if it is for John, I will definitely let you know. And go ahead, Maggie.
Yes, just a small thing. There's a nice path that goes south from the Hudson restaurant along the Hudson. And speaking of the lighthouse, I think it's intended to eventually go to the lighthouse, but it stops maybe about 5 blocks short of that because the water comes in. And I know that the Parks Department has had finishing this on their shovel-ready list for a really long time, but I don't think they're even looking for funds to do it. I think they've thrown up their hands. And if this were finished, I can tell you that the economic development for Inwood would explode by all the bicyclists who would be coming up here from the south, because right now they get to the hill at the lighthouse and a lot of them just go, yeah, no, turn around. But if they could get to Dyckman Street along the river, that would be great. So anyway, that is my suggestion, that this community board ask the Parks Department for funding to finish that section of, I'm not sure what they call it, but the Hudson Water Level Greenway.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. I know traffic and transportation is also going to be presenting later, so we'll see if it's an item there. If not, we will also add it in the new items for tonight. So thanks.
We actually do have it on as one of our items,
Okay.
Catherine. We have Inwood Hill, High Bridge, and Fort Tryon Parks reconstruct 60+ miles of park pathways and paving.
Well, this is not a reconstruction. There is none.
Nobles, this is
Isn't that the lighthouse link? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Darrell, you're correct. This is
It's the Lighthouse link.
It's the Lighthouse link, the Fort Washington Park Greenway. It's
Yep.
on the list, and the Parks Department. The Parks Department is seeking funding for it. It's number 24 on that list.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Thank
It is
you.
on.
It is
All
on
right.
there.
So Nobles, you have two more hands.
Sure.
Barbara's next. Go ahead, Barbara.
All right, I'm unmuted now. Nobles did excellent presentation on our first 5 capitals. I do want to put in number 6, which is the Ann Loftus playground, the east side of it. The reason I want that, really brought up and bumped up to, number 2 or 4 star is that currently the center is being renovated and the playground is closed. And the east side is not part, the east side of that same playground is not part of the renovation. There were not funds to finish that. And that will include a sensory playground, really the first one north of 96th Street to address the autistic and the disabled. That will also require the closing of the playground again. So I would like that to be done as quickly as possible, even while this renovation of the center and the western side of the playground is being done, or we could lose 2 years in this playground. So therefore, time is of the essence for item number 6, renovating the eastern perimeter of Fort Tryon and Loftus Playground. Okay?
Thanks, Barbara. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sally, go ahead.
Okay, speaking of time is of the essence, I appreciate playgrounds, recreational facilities and everything else, but time is of the essence when it comes to the environment. And while we did discuss it a lot, some of the critical things we need to do for an environment did not get sufficiently ranked. And I would point specifically to Hudson and Harlem shoreline restoration, including salt marshes, oyster castles, etc. We need to take care of our shoreline. That's what rises up and floods people. We also need to take care of our rainwater, our stormwater, which is mentioned in Steve Simon's presentation when he talks about green infrastructure. But if we're going to get serious, I'm sick of hearing politicians say the time is now. No, the time is not now. The time was about 20 years ago. But we've destroyed our environment, and I think that we as a community board need to take the climate and environmental change seriously and rank things like our shoreline greater than number 25 on a list of parks projects. Time is of the essence.
Thanks, Sally.
All right, well, that's pretty much it for parks and cultural fairs. As Noble, thank you so much, Nobles, for a great report. As folks can see, I could only share part of the capital request on the park side. So like he shared top 6, there's about 20 something. So please take a look at them diligently, keep dropping, and we'll catch them if they are included or not included. Okay, so next up is land use.
Thank you, Catherine. So going from one extreme to the other, I think land use in many years in the past did not rank any capital or expense priorities, but in the last few, we have ranked the ones that you see before you with some modifications. And I'll point out that land use typically is dealing with the Department of City Planning and other agencies that are dealing with the city priorities as it pertains to development and zoning. And so when we think about the capital, one of the things that continues to be of great importance to Washington Heights, Inwood, and quite frankly, all of the city of New York is affordable housing. And so what we've put together is a request, and this goes to HPD, but to allocate capital funds to a development initiative whereby vacant city-owned lots are identified and packaged in RFPs for scatter site development, because in many cases, they're not single large sites. and have affordability defined by the AMI, the area median income of Washington Heights and Inwood. We had this same request last year, and as Catherine mentioned, we do get responses. The response was, that's kind of within, HPD's portfolio, and they're working on it. But as we all know, if we look at what happened with the Eliza and with some of the others, the AMI might work, but the unit distribution doesn't make sense given the community. There are developments that are on city-owned land where there was no consultation, with the community board. So this continues to be an overarching priority where the way the city approaches the development, the way they're going to package it, the way they're going to promote development impacts what we get in the end. And so if we're saying upfront how we want them to package it, that's a critical component. And it's also telling them where we want them to put the capital dollars for housing and how we want that capital to be allocated so that it is supporting the kind of affordable housing that we mean by affordable housing. Related to that, if we go to expense, is to assign additional planning staff to work with Community Board 12 to update the planning study that we undertook with City College and finished back in 2007, and to formulate a current community-based planning initiative that is exclusive of anything the city undertook with the Inwood rezoning plan. The response last year was, EDC has incorporated some of this, and the community board's response is what EDC did with the Inwood rezoning plan was not in any way responding to the planning priorities that have come out of the board and the community for the last decade. And in speaking with city planning staff at our September land use meeting, they pointed out that it's a tight budget environment and hiring more people may not be possible. This expense request is not asking city planning to hire more people. It's asking them to allocate additional staff to work with us. Right now, we had 2 people working with us. One of them left, so we have 1, and she does not work with us on any full-time basis. So this is asking Department of City Planning to make it a priority, the same way that they made it a priority years ago working with CB9 and its 197A plan, which turned out to become a major rezoning initiative along the lines of what they were asking for. We're asking them to prioritize the planning goals of Washington Heights and Inwood and do that by assigning more staff to work with us to move the process forward. Once again, compared to Parks and Culture, there are lots of individual projects and initiatives that they have. From the land use perspective, we have far less, but the whole point is these are overarching things that are saying this is the priority of the city of New York, and how that priority manifests itself impacts how development happens and the kind of development that occurs. And so those are the goals, both planning and expense, that land use is focused on.
Okay, great. Are there any questions for land use for Wayne or any item related to those items? Okay, we have one hand from Maggie. Go ahead, Maggie.
So I wrote something for the environmental committee, but I think it also applies to the land use. A third of Inwood is in the floodplain and half will be before too long. We don't have a flood zone as such or zoning. The city continues to upzone lands in the floodplain. That's just going to cause more death and destruction as climate change proceeds. And we need to be stopping building in the floodplain as a first step. There are whole provinces in Canada that are not only doing this, but requiring buyouts of buildings in floodplain to move people away. So can CB12 please ask for the city to uh, have a flood zone or zoning and increase the size of the flood buffer in Inwood and stop building in the floodplain.
I would point out that, what you say goes to my point about how city priorities manifest itself in development. One of the points that Community Board 12 made when we were responding to the most recent city initiative for, flood-related zoning was that initiative only looked at, areas that were flood prone from the waterfront. They did not look at any inland areas that were flood prone from heavy rains or, other events. And we said, if they're looking at the area, in that case, the entire city, they need to look at both. And we raised, and I think it might have been at one of the monthly borough meetings, and Eleazar can, give more detail. How is the city responding to that request? Once again, the overall planning priorities of the city manifest themselves in development. And we're saying that, yes, we agree, the waterfront development and building in flood prone areas doesn't make a lot of sense. But as, Henri and Ida showed us, it's not just the waterfront that gets flooded. And so the city needs to look at what they are doing vis-a-vis zoning and what they're doing vis-a-vis zoning that is supposed to be working to counter, flood-prone areas more broadly than they currently are.
So what's the follow-up plan?
That is exactly the question, Maggie. We've already made the request. We need to know, how are they actually responding to that request? And in so many instances, and I hear Steve Simon in the back of my head, we make requests vis-a-vis resolutions. The question then is, what is the follow-up and how aggressive are we in ensuring that there is follow-up?
Awesome, thank you. Maria Luna, for you.
I'm just wondering, a question for Wayne. Wayne, the way I read this particular item, wouldn't that be, we will have a better chance of having this item taken care of if it goes on the dispense size as opposed to capital?
Well, this one is expense.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were dealing first with capital.
Well, no, we only had two. So the first one that I talked
okay.
about was
Okay.
basically identifying the sites,
All
putting
right.
them in packages with RFPs and allocating capital.
Right.
That
Okay.
was the capital one. And this one is, assigning more staff, which means how they're allocating,
Right.
their
Okay.
existing operating budget to work with us.
Okay,
Now,
thank you.
if they have the ability to hire, we do not object. But only a month ago, we were told they don't have the ability to hire more. So we're saying, fine, from your existing operating budget, your existing, allocation of planners, assign more of them to work with us.
All right. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Okay. Awesome. So I see no new suggestions or items. So thank you so much, Wayne. We're gonna move on to health and environment. And we're gonna start with capital, Steve.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 items for the capital budget. The first, I believe Sally has already alluded to, which is an environmental initiative to install green infrastructure such as bioswales to divert stormwater from the sewer system and address climate change issues in our community. This would be done through DEP. My understanding right now is that DEP does not have a green infrastructure program in Manhattan, so it would be important to rank this one highly if we're going to make an impression on them on how we believe it to be a need in our community. Our second priority has been something that we've been pushing for a number of years, which is to have the city construct a new garage for District 8 on the Upper East Side and relocate its trucks from District 12 as quickly as possible to comply with coterminality. Some years ago, the District 8 operation was moved up to Inwood on what was presumably going to be a temporary basis. And now I think for about 20 years, we've had these trucks coming in and out of our community every single day. I mean, we also host trucks from, I think, 2 other districts in the Bronx. This is in clear violation of the city charter provision on co-terminality, in which each district is supposed to take care of its own services. And so we're bearing the burden of having a lot of additional truck traffic in Inwood, which by all rights should not be something that we would have to deal with. So we learned at the Land Use Committee a couple of weeks ago that the city planned to build a new garage for District 8 apparently has been stymied and is not moving forward. So once again, I think we need to push this item. Our third capital item is to expedite the replacement of old water mains and sewer lines in our community. The city has been acting on this in the last couple of years. There has been a lot of work going on in both Washington Heights and Inwood, but I'm pretty sure we still have plenty of old water mains and sewer lines that need to be replaced. And our last item is to provide additional garbage collection trucks and street sweepers with snow plows. This sort of matches one of our expense items, which is to ask for the increased collection of trash baskets, especially on commercial streets. And it may well be that some additional trucks could be useful in that in carrying out that work. So can I move now to the expense budget?
Yes, you can. It's on the screen.
Okay, thank you. So our number one item, which has been our number one item for a number of years, and has also been the board's number one item for, I believe, at least 2 or 3 years, for the last 2 or 3 years, is to expand mental health services in the community, especially for seniors and others whose mental health and social engagement have been adversely impacted by COVID-19. Well, obviously, we've updated this in light of the pandemic, but the need for additional mental health services in the community is still a high priority as far as our committee is concerned, and hopefully the board will once again agree with this item. And let me tell you, this is important not just to send a message down to city government and to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, but also to send a message to New York Presbyterian, which is still trying to still hopes to close the psych unit at the Allen Hospital, and also to the Columbia University Irving Medical Center to try to urge them to increase mental health services in the community, which I think they may be planning to do, but it always helps to urge them on. Our number 2 item is a follow-up on the resolution we recently passed, calling upon the city to open a full-time COVID-19 vaccination site in Washington Heights, with an annex or other regular presence in Inwood. This is very, very important, especially now with booster shots on the horizon and people being told to get a 3rd shot, and in the case of Johnson & Johnson, at least a 2nd shot. We haven't reached a significant threshold, a high enough threshold for people getting their first shots, let alone the booster shots. So we need a full-time site. We shouldn't just be relying upon these pop-up vans. As good as they are, they're not the full answer. We need, as we mentioned, as the board agreed to last month, we need a full-time vaccination site, maybe comparable to the what we had at the Fort Washington Armory some months ago. Our third priority is to, as I mentioned before, is to increase trash basket collection on commercial streets throughout the district, adding a 2nd shift so that baskets can be emptied more than once daily. I mean, I think we've all seen on Broadway, St. Nicholas, 181st, Dykeman, on the major streets, we've had overflowing trash baskets. We've had awful litter conditions for at least the last year and a half. I mean, we've always had bad conditions, but it's been worse over the last year and a half, I would say. Number 4 is to increase services to prevent and treat chronic diseases such as Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and hypertension, conditions that increase susceptibility to COVID-19. Number 5 is to increase staff to conduct regular noise enforcement, especially nighttime, air quality monitoring, and water quality testing. Number 6 is to increase substance abuse services in our community, including opioid overdose prevention education and funding for syringe cleanups and collections. I mean, I have to say, in just the last few days, I have been somewhat shocked to come upon people just shooting up in public. I saw somebody today outside one of our parks, Gorman Park at Broadway and 190th Street. The other day, I saw somebody in the Highbridge Park. This is a real problem, citywide and in our community. So I would hope that we can rank this one fairly high. Next is to increase HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment services and LGBTQ services. Next, increase funding for education and outreach on recycling, reuse, and composting. As Maggie mentions in the Q&A, we could use a more vigorous composting program, as well as education on proper disposal of household garbage. This is one of the contributing factors as to why we have overflowing trash baskets, because people are disposing of their household garbage in those trash baskets improperly. Next is increase pest control efforts to eliminate rats, cockroaches, etc. And lastly, but definitely not least, because this is very close to my heart, and also helps with the COVID-19 vaccination efforts, is to provide funding to ensure that all local public schools have multi-service health clinics with nurses and social workers. So I commend all 10 of these items to you, and hope that you will give them a favorable consideration. Thank you.
All right, Steve, you have Wayne for you.
I don't have Wayne. Wayne is a separate entity. He's
Yes, we are not. I just want to make a quick point regarding the capital project that Health and Environment has concerning building the garage. I mean, this is a perfect example of how city priorities manifest themselves in development or not. Here you have a city-owned site in Washington Heights, Inwood, that's hosting vehicles that are serving the Upper East Side. That's showing the priorities of city government. And that's why, I'm pointing out that from a planning perspective, we need to focus on that, because how the land is used is a function of what the priorities are coming out of City Hall, and we need to be mindful of that.
Do I understand that you're advocating that the board members rank that as a high priority?
I'm advocating not only do they rank it as a high priority, but they need to think, globally, how do these projects fit into, what we're arguing in terms of having a planning perspective guide development, as opposed to just having, the city do one-offs without any thought of how it relates to community planning priorities.
Well, what bothers me is what we found out at your committee meeting recently is that the plan that they had to construct a garage on, I think, East 25th Street apparently is not moving forward. And where we thought we finally were going to get some relief, and District 8 was finally going to move out of our area, it now looks as though that plan is stymied for some reason. So that's why.
Once again, the priorities, and we are not one of them.
Okay, so Steve, you have a hand for Maggie, so I'm going to take Maggie, Sally, and the time is 7:23. We want to make sure we have robust conversations for other items as well. So I'm going to keep it kind of tight moving forward. Go ahead, Maggie.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Yeah, so we are not only dealing with M8's garbage, but also Bronx 7 and 8. So that's, 4 times as much. And instead of doing that, what we should be doing then is to kick them out and use the space for in-vessel composting. And we, because the city doesn't have a lot of room for composting, and, inside the incinerator building is a lot of room. They could be building ramps in there and all kinds of things. So I would suggest that we ask for capital funding to accomplish that. And that would help get us composting better. It would help us figure out how to, improve the technology and would also make it more fair, as you point out, Steve, as you have pointed out for decades, as I recall, about this M8 atrocity. So I hope that will be put onto the capital list. Also, I hope everybody here will take a look at what I wrote in the chat with regard to the fact that the city is wasting most of our resources, all of our compostable resources, like 40% of the discard stream is compostable. All of that is going out of state to incinerators and landfills. Half of our recyclables are, because we're not educating well enough. We're only spending about 50 cents a head per person per year on that versus some communities out west that are spending like $3 a head. And they're getting a lot more diversion rate than we are. We've been piddling around 18% for decades, and some of them are upwards of 80% diversion. So, and by the way, we're wasting hundreds of millions of dollars sending our compostable and recyclable and reusable items out of the city to be burned and buried. It is just about the worst possible use of money and resources that you can imagine. And I hope that we can prioritize this more than we have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maggie. Sally, then followed by Tanya.
Yeah, just a point that I would make, given the work that's being done by WEACT in conjunction with the Office of Sustainability, we are in fact the environmental justice area. So even though they haven't given us attention in the past, maybe we should emphasize that fact that they're putting all of this in the environmental impact in an already compromised neighborhood.
Thank you. Tanya?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to of course emphasize on the expense side, the noise enforcement, especially at nighttime. It's important that we as a board and of course community understand the impact of excessive noise on the health of our community and on our individuals in our community, and how excessive noise contributes to adverse health outcomes, including physical health and mental health negative outcomes. We have another item that talks about increasing the budget for preventative diseases such as diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that. But noise, excessive noise, these things, these conditions are exacerbated or even contribute to people having such conditions due to lack of sleep and constant interruption during the night. And I think that that's extremely important that people understand the connection to that, and that we continue to rank that high to make sure that we are creating a healthy community. I can say from my own personal experience, at the height of 2020 in the summer, by October of 2020, after the relentless excessive noise, I actually had a blood sugar level of almost 300 from lack of sleep, from the constant disruption is extremely dangerous. And none of our community, from people like myself who have some of these conditions, to our elderly people, to our school children who need to sleep so they can learn, all of these things, these things are impacted by excessive noise. And I just hope that we continue to understand that noise pollution is just as important as any other type of pollution in our community, and is just important in terms of other types of environmental challenges and issues. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Tanya. All right, and thank you, everyone. You've heard it from Steve and from members. Again, keep looking at the Q&A as community members shout out some of the items that are important to them. So we're going to move on to Mary Anderson and concerns of the aging.
Hi, everybody. we had, you know, a couple of meetings that focused really on these items. Don't have a lot of new items, but we have, you know, some continued support items that are very important. And I just want to review those things, the capital first. One of the things that we focused on is the connectivity for seniors, the ability to, you know, get into Zoom with the equipment and, you know, the Wi-Fi access and that sort of thing. So item number 1 on our list of capital is system-wide upgrade of CB12M area to improve access to connectivity and Wi-Fi. That we ranked as number 1 on the capital. So that the seniors can have access. Number 2, renovate as necessary. This is an item that we talked a lot about, and we had kind of a general item prior to this year. One of the things that they had asked for is having more specific information to be able to consider any funding. So renovate as necessary, specifically Star Senior Center and the Rain-In with the Senior Center to comply with safety, ADA, and DFTA regulations. Because they are not, especially Rain-In is not accessible. So, you know, we weren't able to even go and have our meetings there because of the lack of accessibility. The third item on the capital list, provide funding to construct affordable, accessible senior housing. We've had that on the list for a few years now. And we want to have continued support for that item. That's very important because seniors are being forced out of housing because they can't afford the rent. If they need to move for any reason, you know, say to a lower floor because of the, you know, need for accessibility and that sort of thing, they can't do it because of the cost. So we need to continue to press for that. So going into the expense items, number 1, again, funding for free Wi-Fi access to seniors in CB12. DFTA is apparently giving out some tablets to some seniors who are in need of, and getting them started with Wi-Fi, but then who's going to continue to pay for it? The seniors can't afford that. So, you know, they have it for a month and then what? What good is the tablet going to do if they can't afford the Wi-Fi access? So we need to get that in place, very important. The second item, increase access and outreach to healthy, culturally appropriate food for seniors with medical needs. And that's an item that's been on the budget for a few years. We have continued support for that. We need to have that because when seniors don't have access to healthy, culturally appropriate food, they don't eat, they eat incorrectly, and they really are in medical jeopardy and, you know, end up being hospitalized when that could be avoided. The third item, increase the expansion and the program expanded in-home services for elderly persons. Funding to provide affordable home care, including sliding scale reimbursement. What's happening with that is it seems like the funding seems to have been increased for families with children. We understand that need, but the funding for the elderly has decreased. We need to get it back up there so that can happen. Because if people can't, you know, afford home care, if their insurance doesn't provide for it, again, and seniors are in jeopardy in their homes. The next item, increase funding for senior transportation program by restoring prior city council funding and expanding access and outreach. We've continued support for that item, very important. People can't get to their appointments, can't get to the doctors, can't get to the dentist. And we, you know, therefore the decreasing health of the elderly, very important to pay attention to that, and we really need that item looked at. And increase OTPS funding for replacement furnishings and senior centers as needed. At this point, there's very little monies available when senior centers need to have, items like new furniture or, new tables and chairs because the furniture's falling apart, new computers, it's just not available. And some of the furniture actually gets so dilapidated that, it's dangerous for the seniors to be using that furniture.
Okay, I have a hand for you, Mary, because I know that that's the last item, right?
Okay.
We can get, okay, great. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Mary, I'm wondering whether you might be misusing the CS designation for continued support, because what it's meant to be used when something is already funded in the budget, and we just want to show that we want to see it carried out, and we believe, and we're just offering continued support. In your case, it looks as though you're arguing that you're advocating that these items need to be funded, and therefore I think your committee should be ranking them.
So I made an error in marking those CS. That was my brain not working correctly.
No, it's you just had to.
But you're right. I mean, I was,
But so I would, if I would just say that you could just list them as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gotcha. And the same thing with the capital. The third item can be 3 rather than CS. I would change all of those in that case.
All right, so I changed on the funding side. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what we said actually in the committee, and then I thought maybe it shouldn't be ranked that way, but between. Thank you, Steve.
All's well that ends well.
Okay, I don't see any additional hands or comments related to items related to concerns of the aging.
And I just want to say thank you, Steve, for continuing to include the mental health item, which includes seniors. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so Maria raised her hand. Maria, you're the last one before I move on to Daryl.
No, I just want to add to the members of the board that on this particular request for upgrading the Wi-Fi, if you know that now everything, especially for the senior, everything needs to be done through a either a computer, a telephone, and things like that. It's important that we rank this as high as we can, because the seniors are at home. Most of them cannot go to senior centers, and it is extremely important that it's upgraded the access to the Wi-Fi for all of them. So just to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, thanks, Mary. And Daryl, it's on to you for Housing and Human Services. And just a reminder, there is 5 minutes on the clock.
Oh, you want me now? Sorry.
Sorry, yes, it's your
Oh,
turn.
I thought there
So
was
if you
one
can-
more question. Sorry, I was confused.
No, not at all. So you can, as everyone does, you can either share them all or share context, your reasoning, committee's reasoning.
Oh, I'll just share. Can you scroll up a little just so we can see? Some of the, I guess, overarching things for the committee. Well, first, let me start off by just saying big shout out to Mariel and Bruce for leading the efforts on this and to the whole committee. So, just really for the capital expenditures, there's basically 3 themes: affordability, supportive and transitional housing, as well as modernization and rehabilitation. Those are really the things that we looked at when looking at the capital budget. And if you want to go to the expense budget, and also similarly, there are themes throughout here as well looking at enforcement, infrastructure, as well as supportive services. I will just point out, one thing, the second priority in expenses, food pantries, that has been something that certainly during the COVID pandemic that has really been, I think, a godsend to many people, and the food pantries have been really overwhelmed. So that's just, something to keep in mind. Hopefully that's only for the duration of the pandemic and lessens soon. But that's still a high priority for the committee. That was really it, unless someone had specific questions about anything.
Are there any questions, comments related to housing items, y'all? Housing always ranks high in our committee, so.
I
in
think
our
Steve's hand is
Go
up,
ahead,
or is
Steve.
that an old hand?
Yes, that's a new hand.
Oh, okay.
Well, I sometimes feel like an old hand. I just want to make a point that maybe it gets lost on the list, that the housing code and building code inspectors are the heart of the city's enforcement program. And I don't know how many inspectors we currently have. I remember some years ago, we had to fight for them every single year at the city council. And we had, I think it was 226 inspectors at one point. I believe the number is now lower, but maybe we should look into that. But I would ask that people not overlook the fact that these code enforcement inspectors are extremely important. When you make a complaint to 311 about a condition in your apartment, these are the inspectors who show up and respond and write the violations to the landlords.
Steve, I thank you for pointing that out. You raise a good point. I think it seems like, a quick line maybe in the budget, but really what we're talking about is are people able to be safe in their homes? Are people able to be in their homes without fear that their actual home is not only crumbling around them, but also a danger to them and their children, with mold and leaks, vermin, a variety of things that these inspectors look at that really speak to the day-to-day living of the residents. So
I believe that our district has the greatest amount of rent-regulated housing in the entire city of New York. And so our residents rely more on these code enforcement inspectors, I believe, than maybe any other district in the city. So this is very, very important.
And if you've ever needed one, we don't have enough of them.
Exactly, right.
All right, so I have Maria and Tanya for you.
Okay, on that same question about Steve, on the number 20, you says increase funding for more HBD housing can be added there and increase the number of inspectors, code inspector, instead of adding one more item. Can that be maybe rephrased?
I think it already says that. It says more inspectors.
But it
Yeah.
says, it says housing code. Okay, so
You have the word more there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marie.
Tanya, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And very, very quick. I would say number on the capital side, number 16, about increasing funding for free legal representation in housing court. I would say that's really important. Think about it. The eviction moratorium is going to be lifted, and a lot of people in this community will be vulnerable to eviction. And so it's going to be very important that people have some sort of access to legal representation in those cases, because we do anticipate there will be plenty of people ending up in eviction court, in housing court, once that happens. Thank you.
That's a very good point.
Can I ask Daryl?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was under the impression that all of our zip codes are currently qualify for the right to counsel program. Am I wrong about that?
I believe that's the case. I could double check.
Yeah, because maybe we want to change this thing about not currently covered. I mean, the rest of it may be relevant, but I thought that the program had been expanded last year to include all of our zip codes. If you could check on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and I can make the edit before we resend it. Liz, is this about that? Can you go ahead, Liz?
Yeah, I just want to say that all of our zip codes are included, but I think that this particular budget item speaks to the necessity of lowering the threshold so that more of the people in our zip codes can be included in this program. But all of our zip codes are included.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make that edit on the first line. All right. All right, thank you, Daryl. Thanks, everyone. We're gonna move on to, is there someone here for traffic and transportation? I did not see Debbie on the screen. All right, if there's no assistant chair, I'll move on and maybe she'll pop back in. All right, so we're gonna move on to public safety. Public safety.
Yeah, I just became chair of the committee. So what we did with the ranking was go off what the committee has been working on for the last year. So what I would, if there's anybody in the committee that wants to speak on it, if not, I would just refer people to the spreadsheet.
Okay, I have a hand. I don't know if it's for you, Domingo, if it was for traffic. So this is Jomari Smith. Go ahead, Jomaris.
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. Blessing.
Okay, Jomaris disappeared from the screen. There's two hands, Maria and Sally. So go ahead, Maria. One second.
On the top.
All right, that's weird. My audio seems to disconnect. Jomaris, can you hear us? If you can unmute and speak, sorry.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am here with a commission of seven tenants of the buildings on 174. I would like to express to the committee our gratitude for selecting the problem with the 174th Street a number one priority, and also the District 12. I don't know if you can see me here. I don't see myself. Are you? Am I on? Being heard?
Jomari, we can hear you. Is this in reference? Sorry, can you repeat the item that you're in support of?
The reconstruction of the 174 Street, the problem with the 174 that was voted number one from the committee last. It was placed number one in the last meeting.
Okay, I see it. That's for traffic and transportation. We had quickly moved to public safety, but I'll allow you 2 minutes to speak so that members can hear about traffic, just in case nobody comes from traffic to explain. So go ahead.
I think we usually leave that for the end because there is a lot of questions there, important items that needs to be discussed, even if the chair and the co-chair are not able to attend today. So, yeah.
But since Jomari's with a group of 7, I'm gonna allow her to speak on their behalf.
Yes, please. I just wanted, Maria, thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you for placing this issue in the number one as item number one. And I would like to encourage that the budget will be allowed. As we said before, this street is very seriously denting, and it's going like going down too fast, sinking. And as we mentioned before, the Commissioner of DOT was here and said that the street needed to be reconstructed, but there was not funding. So they requested us to see if there's any chance we can have the funding to have this done as soon as possible, to place the funding for the next following agenda. I have Mr. Jackson Guevara here from 515, Marcelino Perez 509. Ustedes pueden decir hello.
Rafael
Santana
Santana
from 501, Marcelino Salazar from 503, Dania Melo from 526, and Miss Teresa, let's step out for a second. So we're asking that we can have the capital funding, so we can have that included in the budget for the following year, if possible. And I thank you very much, and I thank the District 12 for helping us. We've been fighting for this for over 3 years. Therefore, I would like someone of this tenant to tell you how much is affecting this, Mr. Rafael.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking our problem for your attention. We're gonna appreciate everything that you can do with for us, because really is that it's emergency, especially for our senior people living in this block, because for example, for the Cesar Rise, they gotta walk so hard for them to go to the next block, because the hole is a big hole in the middle of the street. And the Cesar Rise transportation, they can open the ramp that they getting on the vehicle. You know, it's so hard, especially in the winter. The winter is here. We need the politician, whatever people, whatever support that you can do for us is gonna be appreciated, really.
Thank you so much. Please place the capital funding for this street. We need that assistance as soon as possible. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for placing in priority number 1. And please, let's work with this. Thank you so much to the committee. Thank you. Thank you.
We appreciate
Thank you.
We know it's in good hands.
Thank you, Jemai. So again, this is in reference to the West 174th Street listed under traffic and transportation. I have 2 old hands. Steve, you just raised your hand. Is that for the tenants, or is this on in general?
I have a question for Yomaris.
Okay, go ahead.
I can go now?
Yes.
Yomaris, this seems to be a pretty immediate problem. I'm wondering, have you brought this to the attention of Councilmember Rodriguez?
Jamari? Where'd she go?
There they go.
I don't know that this should wait for another year.
I think they left.
If you remember the presentation at the committee, they showed the pictures, because even Ebenezer Smith is aware of that. He was supposed to be sending this information to the elected officials, just to take, this thing as an urgent matter, because it's really old. Now, are we going to continue doing the
I'm here. I'm sorry. It was the
no. So just real quick, just to set some order, and also in terms of time and the number of committees that items we still have to discuss. So we're going to quickly allow Jomaris to respond. I know Ebenezer is already in touch with them. So this is something I'm assuming we're going to continue to hear about. Unless there's a member of traffic and transportation who is going to speak to specific items, we're moving back onto public safety and continuing.
Okay, so
Jomari, you can respond.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we did speak to Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa, to Councilman Idanis, and we also our congressman also knows about it, so they're all aware that we've been working together with District 12 and Mr. Ebenezer Smith about this issue for about 3 years. So yes, they're aware of that, and they also are aware that DOT commissioner was here. We presented pictures. We have pictures from all the tenants. So we urge and we ask that you please take this into consideration for the capital funding. Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, everybody, for giving us this opportunity to be here and talk and say, what we needed to say in regards to this issue that is causing our street to have serious problems and our building. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope that we continue to hear updates at both at the committee and general meeting level.
Thank you.
All right, so I
Have a good night.
thank you, good night. I see Sally still has her hand up. Isidro has a hand. Isidro hasn't spoken, so go ahead, Isidro. And then Sally.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I know for a fact that Benice has brought this matter on a monthly basis to the attention of DOT when he has his cabinet district service cabinet meeting. And at that meeting, there's very few feedback that is given to Ebenezer. So I hope that through this mean, something can be done as soon as possible, as Steve was saying, because this I think is an urgent matter. Oftentimes when the cops pass by, they have to actually slow down to cross or pass the street. So in case of an emergency, there could be chaotic or chaos if this is not fixed quick enough. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sally, is this for traffic or for public safety?
This is public safety.
Okay, cool. So
Okay.
I repeat, no one here is here from traffic, so please take a good look at those items. They always come up. Go ahead, Sally, we're going back to public safety.
I have comments on both the capital and expense. If you could put the expense up first, so I can give my comments directly. Okay, I guess my issue with this is that much of what's being discussed with respect to mental health is directing more resources to the police department. We know that that's an improper direction of funding because police don't know how they basically escalate the situation. They're not experts in de-escalation. The city is piloting, and what happens is people get killed, and disproportionately it's people of color. I think that we should be advocating through public safety for something like the Correct Crisis Intervention Today proposal, which is to expand, they're seeking funding to expand their pilot project that will send in a mental health team to crisis calls, an EMT and a peer de-escalator, not a policeman. And so I find it, there's a lot of discussion throughout the year in the committee about focusing on the correct response to a call that comes in from an emotionally disturbed person or family, that we send mental health experts out, we don't send police. So I think that that needs to be rethought. My other question on this is we had also talked to public safety, or I think Liz had forwarded our request for cameras in our parks, and I don't see that on the list. But it had come up, especially with some of the public safety issues that we want cameras, and I guess they have to come through public safety. So I think that needs to be added. And then I had one on capital, but I need to look at it in order to know what I'm.
Okay. So there is an opportunity to make an edit on the line 34. I'll let Domingo chime in on that instead of adding an additional item. There's 3 hands, so Curtis,
Can I give you my
Liz, and
comment
Mary.
on the capital?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to look at that really quickly. Okay, my comment on the capital, except I don't see public safety. Can you scroll to?
Oh, sorry about that. Right here.
Okay. They're asking for 2 Argus cameras for the 33rd precinct in 2 specific locations. I'm wondering why there's no request for cameras in the shooting alley that I live in Inwood. and why we are disregarding the fact that we have a disproportionate share of murders and shootings in Inwood, and yet there's no specific priority directed towards safety in that neighborhood. That's just a question for the committee. I don't see why the 34th doesn't do their job, but maybe if we had cameras, they would be forced to.
Okay, so Curtis, Liz, and Maria.
All right, thank you very much. So for the, how do I say this? So I was absent from the last meeting. Obviously, I'm no longer public safety chair. These items, I didn't have a chance to weigh in on these items, nor did anyone ask me to weigh in on these items. Many of these are carryovers from the previous year, and I would have expected them to evolve, particularly the capital expense items. I agree with you, Sally. In light of everything that's been going on, I think there is an additional need for adding the 34th to line 55. There is no longer a priority or a need for line 56. I would have suggested that the committee remove that item. FDNY has not brought that to our attention over the past year. It was an item that was a carryover from when Richard Lewis was chair, like many years ago, that I added to the to our list. So I would suggest that it's on the list now, and if the chair wants to remove it, that it is ranked low, because once again, the FDNY has not kept that as a priority or have brought that up in any of our discussions over the past year. As far as the cameras and the 3.3, this was something that we obviously heard directly from the previous commanding officer, who said this would be a big help at the time on this particular area. Once again, this issue did not come up at all this past year. So I understand there is a need for Argus cameras. I don't think we have to be as specific in adding the exact locations to that line item. So I would request an edit there as well, if the chair is okay with removing the location. And the issue of all-terrain vehicles did not come up from FDNY at all this year. So I wouldn't rank that high if I had to recommend to my fellow board members on that. Everything else seems to be consistent with the work that we discussed this past year as a committee. As for Sally's comments, the expenses, and once again, I apologize because I've had a very crazy 3 weeks and I've just been out the loop on most of this stuff. So charge it to my head, not to my heart. So could you go to expenses really quickly, Catherine?
Yeah, you should be able to see it on the screen now.
Maybe I'm slow. Oh wait. So for these, I agree with you, Sally. Most of our discussions and all of our resolutions involving this particular issue have included mental health responses, and we have moved and shifted away from saying NYPD should be the people to manage that. So I totally agree with Sally on that. And if the chair agrees, we can strike the NYPD. We need mental health response and clinical professionals, but it does not have to be the NYPD. And and that's consistent with most of our resolutions that we passed this year. Other than that, everything, the speed cameras, I don't have much to say about that. I mean, if I were present, I probably would have advocated against it because we've discussed it several times and we've sent resolutions to, we've discussed this issue in different ways. And I'm not sure if that's still consistent with the work of our committee this past year. So I wouldn't advocate for the speed cameras issue because we kind of resolved that at another level. Like that's been discussed many times. So other than that, that's all I have to say. And I'm happy to answer any questions if the chair needs assistance doing so.
Okay, if Domingo chimes in, let me just move on to Liz and Maria that have had their hand up quickly, and then we can respond as a whole.
Okay, thank you so much. Two things. Now, when we are talking about the light tower within the 33rd precinct, what is that supposed to mean? What is within the 33rd precinct? Is it on the west side? I mean, the downtown, midtown, what is that supposed to be?
That is what Captain Bello at one point in time spoke to our committee about the challenges in violence in particular areas, and there's a low lighting. And these towers, they're able to be removed and placed in areas when there are particular situations. And this was something that Captain Bello mentioned years ago, which is why I said, I'm not sure if it's even relevant to our committee, to the work this current time. They did say that the tower. Let me just find that item, the tower within. So it would be up to them to decide when and where they put the tower and how long it stayed there to help mitigate crime.
Okay, so is it like one light tower for the entire precinct or?
Yes,
or
one
many-
tower, because they said they didn't have a tower. They may have one, I'm not sure if they have one or two, but they don't have, if they have one tower in, you know, in the one area that has high crime, there may be another area that needs a camera as well for gun violence or whatever. So they need an additional tower.
Okay, and okay, so
Okay.
you know the
Well,
definition. Okay, just one more thing. The definition of you know, a high crimes area and things like that. That had to, because crimes it moves from time to time, from area to area,
Yes.
depending on the moves of the criminals that we have running around in our communities. And the other thing is that I wanted to make sure that you people, you know, all of them, you know, that I'm the president of the council, so I hear a whole lot of stories that you don't hear. When someone calls 911 because the person may be disturbed and they send the police, is because you don't know if the person has a gun, has a knife, or anything like that. A social worker is not going to do it. The social worker can compensate with the work of the police. It needs to be controlled, someone that is a violent person. So let's be a little careful about saying, don't send the cops, because we never know how the person that someone have called for help is going to respond in a violent way or whatever. So, you know, you have to be careful about doing
I'm
that.
just looking,
Okay.
Maria, I'm just looking.
Hold on,
at
Steve,
polls.
Sally, just give me a second because we have hands waiting and Domingo also, there's a number of edits. So go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, echo what,
Sorry, you're on mute, Liz. There you go.
okay, I unmuted myself and someone muted me, so let's not do that, please. I just wanted to echo what Curtis and Sally said about adding cameras, that part of that came out of parks, but because cameras are really under the purview of the NYPD, we rolled that over to the Public Safety Committee. Similarly, lighting in parks is showing up under Traffic and Transportation Committee as a capital priority, because lighting, even though it's in parks, is done through DOT. So I didn't want for anyone in the public or anyone on the board to think that the Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee was remiss in addressing those two items. We just were working with our peers and colleagues on other committees under whose purview those items rest. I would also like to say, just as a general comment, that when we're doing our priorities, I know that for the committees that we sit on, we all kind of think of each of our committee's priorities as our children, and we love them all, and we think that they're all important. But as I'm listening to my colleagues in other committees talk about their priorities, you know, all of this stuff is important. And I would really urge people, when they're doing their rankings, to really mix and match and make sure that we're ranking items from each of the committees and not just, you know, taking the committee that we sit on and ranking all of those and then ranking everybody else's after that. I think we need to really think outside of our own narrow parts of our community where we may live, or our own narrow focus of interest on the committees in which we sit, and really think about the whole board and the totality of the need across different issues.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Steve.
I guess I'm agreeing with Sally, Curtis, and Liz on many of these proposed changes. It does seem as though we should delete the suggestion about mental health clinical staff being added to the NYPD. I think there's a general consensus in the city as a whole that that's not the right approach, and so I don't think we should include that item. And I certainly urge you to change the item about the cameras to include the 34th precinct, and maybe you could include parks. But I would also agree with Curtis that it doesn't. We shouldn't micromanage and specify particular locations. I'm surprised to see 155th Street and Riverside Drive listed, where I live. And I have a hard time envisioning how the FDNY would use an all-terrain vehicle to respond to fires in parks. I don't know if that's even a feasible item. If Curtis is suggesting it should be taken off the list, I would agree with him. And let me just say, there's something here about speed humps. That doesn't belong under the police department. That would go to DOT. They're the ones who put in the humps in the streets.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Let me go. I hope you got note of these. I have a couple notes. Sally and then Tanya.
Are we going to come back to traffic and transportation? If not, I would add, when you talk about lighting, I would emphasize the need for solar lighting.
For solar, you said?
Solar lighting, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tanya.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I wanted to just say yes in terms of the mental health response. I wanted to somewhat agree with Maria Luna in that, not that, yes, police definitely should not be front line on this, but there are going to be cases where they're going to be called because there's perceptions of danger in those situations. And so they are not going to be completely taken out of the equation, unfortunately. And there is still a need to make sure that they are educated and that they are better prepared to respond in ways that will not dehumanize people and will not end up in deadly situations. So we have to be realistic that there will be times when people will be reporting or calling things in that's perceived to be a dangerous situation, a person being just armed or whatever, that we need to make sure that we are not, that the police are going to be trained properly to do their job, and to respond to these situations. Also, yes, social workers definitely can be utilized, but I want to also say that social work itself is also rooted in oppression, and social workers are not exempt from discrimination or from bias at all. And so I think this type of response is going to need a multi-pronged approach, and not one thing is going to be a utopia, because they're all problematic and rooted in oppression. So just wanted to say that. And I want to pitch for the noise, as before my time runs out, noise enforcement camera, the noise decibel readers, because that's the only way we can prove that there's noise. And that's the only thing sometimes that holds up in court, and our precincts only have 2 noise decibel readers per precinct. That's inadequate. Thank you.
All right, perfect timing. All right, Domingo. So a number of suggestions. No, I haven't heard from any other public safety committee member. Are we striking anything? Are we editing? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll take the recommendations. I'm in an interesting space because I was informed of me taking over this committee, like, what was it, like a few days prior to the meeting. So as I accept the recommendations, I also think it's important for all of us to also note that we all have responsibilities as well. So if there were certain items that weren't meant to continue on this list, I think it would have been appropriate to send an email with the recommendations prior to. You know, I understand we're all facing issues, we're all dealing with things day in, day out. So I haven't received the recommendation from Parks, and most of the suggestions that were provided, I felt I wanted to bring that up in the committee, but I also felt that since the committee had been working for a year, that it was also, they might have a bit more experience on what goes in and what comes out. So I was like, back to I accept all the suggestions, but I also think it's important that we all have responsibilities as well. Suggestions the day of is pretty, interesting, but submit your suggestions, send them via email, and I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, this is not, it wasn't directed at you or Domingo.
I did send this information to the chair at the time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
just.
like I said, right? I didn't receive it, right? So it's not, I'm not asking you who you sent it to. I didn't receive it.
That's so I'm gonna allow Curtis to go just because of the transition point, and then I'm gonna recap what the changes were so that Ebenezer, before we send the final list that everyone actually ranks, that it's reflective of tonight's discussion. So go ahead, Curtis.
No, I don't have any additional comments. Thank you, Domingo, for the work and filling in the vacancy. I did express to the chair, our board chair, that I'm willing to help in any capacity when I stepped aside in August, and he did not facilitate any communication between you or I. So it's not your fault. It's more so an issue with him.
Got it. Noted. Thank you, everyone. All right. So for public safety, we're looking at eliminating and striking, I should say, number 55, 56, 57 would be edited to include just 2 Argus cameras without noting the exact location.
And also putting in precinct 34.
Thank you for that. 33 and 34. Yep. 58 was to strike as well, as it didn't come up. It was a recommendation. And these are the capital side, sorry. And then on the expense side, editing number 34 to, I mean, Sally's suggestion was around the crisis intervention pilot program, and editing that away instead of noting NYPD. And adding cameras in parks under expense. Do the cameras go under expense or under capital? Just based on I'm gonna assume expense.
If it's more than $35,000, it's capital.
Yeah, it goes under capital.
Capital. Okay, so cameras in parks under capital, and then number 37 we remove, and that would technically be under traffic and transportation.
And regarding 34, I mean, Sally's suggestion, I think, is a suggestion, but I think the focus is, adding mental health professional staff, as part of emergency response. That's an example. I don't think it's the limit of what we should be advocating for.
Okay, so non-NYPD. Okay, so we'll I'll have Ebenezer, Domingo, if you could touch base with Ebenezer on the language that we should send out to the board for line 34 would be appreciated. All right, I was trying to get us done tonight, y'all, by 8:30. We have 2 more committees to go, and then we can recap. And if there's any additional items that folks haven't seen or heard, we'll have time for those. So thanks, everyone. We're gonna move on to, Debbie is here. But let me move through youth and education, Debbie, and then I'll get back to you.
Kathy, I just wanted to say something about 37. It's not, speed cameras, if I remember correctly, is not DOT. It's, but the humps, like, I don't know why that, I mean, we don't pay for that. Whether you get a hump or you don't is not a budget item. It's something else. We can always request those, and they don't say no for reasons of cost. So I'm not, and speed cameras, I don't think that might need to stay here, or that's something with the state, but it's not, I don't think it's DOT.
But also the humps don't go any place we want to. They have to analyze, they have to check to make sure.
But I'm just saying we're at a budget meeting. I don't think this is where the budget.
But that's helpful to know for folks who have had thoughts about adding humps that it doesn't necessarily have to be on the budget. Okay, so we'll keep it there for safety. I know that's also technically an old item that's come up in previous years. So we're gonna move on just to Faye. I'll come back to you, Debbie. 5 minutes on the clock, Faye. If you're here, where are you at? Faye, are you here?
Faye is not allowed, it's
no. Okay, so Faye is there anybody from youth and education who can speak to the items?
She asked me to report unless someone else is willing to. But anyway, it's going to be very short. Could you go to dispense for the youth and education, please?
Sure, 1 second. And Maggie, I see your hand. I got you. I'm gonna go back to you after you.
All right.
All right.
Okay,
This
so-
is the expense.
All right. So
Youth
let
and
me.
education.
All right. This is as because she was talking about some items as asking for some fundings for PS 128 and PS 28. So I don't see that here. So I think that we should leave it. Just leave
It
it.
might
with-
be.
Uh-huh.
No, it might be under capital. That's
It's under capital.
Okay, so I believe this there's no changes here. So can you move it to the capital, please?
Yeah, this is capital.
This capital, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is a broken. Okay, so you said that provide funding for like the second one. Provide funding for number one. Funding for the renovation of the bathrooms for students and staff. Where? Which are we talking about? All the schools or a specific school? And the same thing for the second line. To upgrade the auditorium seating. I believe that she was talking about PS 128. That should, we have to be specific about the auditorium.
I think all of these were always about one or two schools.
We cannot, well, but that's it. We have to tell them which schools need the auditorium.
Well, yeah, I
and the-
don't know what happened. I mean, there's sort of two problems here. One, why are we calling out one or two schools? And
Right.
two, what happened to
No,
that?
we did
Because that's
discuss-
always
we-
been here.
No, I'm sorry, but we did discuss each school separately. So I don't know why the schools on the first line, the number of the schools was left out. And the second, also the same thing on the second one. One is PS 1A and the other one is PS 128, or maybe both is for 128. This is what I was thinking about when I saw that.
Okay.
There
So,
were
so
three
just real
schools-
quick. Go ahead.
There were 3 schools mentioned in the meeting, 128, 468, and Wheels. And for some
But-
reason, this document does not include the numbers of the schools.
Wheels is not a school. Wheels is a plaza. Okay,
Well,
but I was talking about bathroom and auditorium. Renovation of the bathroom is one thing, and the upgrade auditorium seating is something else. Which
Right.
school needs each one of the thing is what I have to be specific about. We cannot
Okay,
just
so
say-
Maria, we're gonna have to have the board staff get in touch with Faye so that
Yeah,
she can let us know what it was if nobody from the committee has
So the
the
third,
names here.
you see, on the third line, then you're specific about PS 128. This is where we are. So that was discussed at length. And now this is capital, right? And
Yeah,
then can you just move it to the spend side, please, there?
yeah, expenses on the screen now.
Okay, district seats, increase number of school. Okay, so that's okay. It's just on the other, on the capital that we had the, the difference. So when you send,
Okay.
check with Faye, when you check, send in for the entire board to vote. So that may be, a clarification for them to make a assessment or voting.
Okay.
All
There's
right?
2 hands, Maria. I'm not sure if it's gonna be directed to you, but on this point, Domingo and Osi. Oh, actually, I'll have Osi go first since you haven't heard from her tonight.
Okay, I just want to say that, this is not the first year that we only have 1 or 2 schools that on the budget for different projects. And it seems like we only have like 2 schools in the district, and it's not the case. So I just want to highlight that. And I think that this needs to be changed. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Domingo.
I was gonna say something around OC's remarks as well. It's like, is there like a district needs assessment made that helps identify the school as a priority? Because unfortunately, all of our schools in the district have one issue or another, and to constantly see the same school seems like come on now. So what's happening to the rest of the district? Like, how is this? How are people even identified? And I think it's important to be able to develop a system where the district is already providing what schools have certain needs and going from there, as opposed to picking and choosing based on relationships or personal interests.
But also that is based, that on the principal of the schools have complained directly to us. The other schools don't complain, we don't know.
around here.
Unless we go and check each school, then we don't know what is the problem. But this particular schools, if they keep complaining about this issue, we need to take care of that, or at least pay attention to that. The other schools, I remember George Washington High School had problem with the air condition, with the leaking of the, by the library and things like that. All those things were taken care of at that time. But the other schools, they don't complain unless the board, the 50 members of the board, volunteer to go and check each one school and bring us the, the complaints. Then we can handle that at the, our committee. But in the meantime, 128 and 128
or a simple suggestion could be inviting the superintendent and having the superintendent identify and provide his data, because it's not like schools have to come to you. This is not the DOE.
Yeah, but in defense of Faye, she's been on top of this thing. Remember that she used to be the president also of the school board. So she's very on top of these education issues.
Okay, Maria, I'm gonna have one more hand, which is Liz. And then I have a point and then we're gonna move on. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. I just want to suggest that it might make more sense if the Youth and Education Committee advocated within the context of the School Construction Authority's 5-year capital plan, and had a really concerted effort to talk about things like air conditioning or auditoriums or whatever other needs to be fixed, rather than, as has already been stated, going through the community board budget priorities, which is a much, much smaller budget and much less focused on education because it's focused on so many other different things. So I agree that this is not really the appropriate venue for individual school items for all of the reasons that other people have already stated.
All right, so I'll pass this information from Liz to Faye as the chair of that committee.
Okay, so we hope again that the committee can get in touch with the board office to edit the Youth and Education Committee items. Again, people, you rank as to what you see as high priority and low priority to you and to what you have learned from this community and discussion. And so we want to make sure that, the Youth and Education also gets their shot. Okay, so we're going to move on to business development, and then we're going to go back to traffic and transportation, which is popular. So business development.
Catherine, can I just make one other comment on youth and education?
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
To the extent that there are multiple requests for PS-28 or PS-128, I would strongly urge the committee to combine them into one item, and just ask that the school be renovated with respect to the auditorium, the air conditioning system. Just put it all together so we're not voting on small individual items for each one of those schools. It should be just one line for each one of those schools.
You're right. I believe that you made that comment before.
Yes,
we probably forgot about it. Okay, thank you so much.
Probably every year. And I am disappointed that I had hoped that we would be advocating for a separate building for Wheels, for the Wheels School, since it's now divided between the annex on the south side of 182nd Street and the old 143 building on the other side. So I don't know whether the committee had a chance to look into that, but I was hoping that we would be looking for maybe making a big impact on the on that school. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Maria, I'm sorry, but we have to move on. We still have 2 more committees and major items.
For Faye. She's not here, so.
No, okay. So Francisco, it's your turn with business development.
Okay, hey guys. So what we did was our focus was really about things that impact our small businesses directly. So we focused on things that can be very impactful. For this, we did infrastructure and business subsidies to support optimizing of outdoor dining, which is very similar to the weatherproofing for outdoor dining and Safer Streets initiative, which is why we put that first, because I think it kind of encompasses all of that. Now, the Washington Heights Corner project, I'm not really understanding why this is part of our budget, considering that this is a non-for-profit. But I wasn't here when that was put on. I think that was last year's budget.
And Francisco, it has a new facility. So I don't think we need to advocate for this at all. I think it can come off the list.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I would rather do something for cannabis education for businesses anyway, if that can be added. I know that's too late. But if not, we'll just move on with what we got now.
It's not too late. We can add it under new items.
Yeah.
If you just send me, or the board office, like any specific language you have for that, we'll update this.
And then, okay, Catherine, just fix the spelling of dining on both lines.
Got you.
Oh my.
Sorry, keep going, Francisco, because it's still your presentation time.
Okay, let's go to the expense. Okay, so again, we focused on things that were impactful, that were direct to our small businesses. So marketing support for businesses, which is very important, especially when we talk about like social media and getting into that modern way of marketing your business. Spanish speaking health inspectors is extremely important. As you guys know, we live in a predominantly Latino or Dominican community. So a lot of our business owners reflect that. So it's very important that we have health inspectors that can speak their language. And number 3, building a business, training, hubs. I feel like that's important. We need to keep that relationship between us and the small business services healthy. And that's pretty much it. What you see there, it's pretty much self-explanatory. Again, we focused on things that impact our small businesses directly. So any questions, please feel free.
Okay, you got a question from Sally.
Yeah, going back to the capital for a second, I need to see, yeah. My question is, what about other businesses other than restaurants? And also making sure that, not the optimization, but a lot of them have to sort of clean up their act. So I'm not sure why our focus from a capital standpoint is only on restaurants, given that there are many other businesses. And restaurants seem to be getting a lot of support from the city to the exclusion of other businesses.
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, I mean, from what I see here, I don't see anything that's specific to restaurants.
Dining.
I mean, dining, yeah, no, you're right about that, but it's not exclusive to just dining. We're talking about businesses, infrastructure, and then outdoor dining is part of that. But if you prefer something that's specific to kind of encompass all businesses, all small businesses in our community, I'm down for that.
Yeah, I think that one priority on dining, I guess, is okay, but not our only priority is dining, and both of them very specifically point to dining.
You know what? You're correct. We'll edit that.
Need focus.
Okay, so that's another one to give me language on. I think Debbie has a point on that one as well. Go ahead.
Yep.
I just have a general one, and again, we're community board, where primary thing is interacting with our related agencies, and I watching hundreds of businesses go through the pandemic, small business assistance programs, small business services at New York City Small Business Services is a relevant agency here, and they strikes me that they've had very little budget, and so the resources to assist businesses in accessing assistance has been so limited. And there's so that maybe something that goes to projects of SBS that haven't really been able to be scaled, and I would guess are even more limited when you talk about a Spanish dominant entrepreneurial community, might be a good opportunity, because that they to sort of say in theory that they're there to help businesses and all that, but I think that they really, really, really are limited. in what they can do. And people were really kind of out on their own and had to sort of scrounge around for getting help with all this stuff. Just an idea. Maybe it's a little late in the game, but yeah.
I mean, I don't know, Francisco, if you want, go ahead.
No, it's noted. She's absolutely right. I think that there needs to be a kind of liaison between the small business services and the actual business owners. But I'll make a note of that.
Debbie, do you see that as a new line of provide funding to SBS for
yeah,
a
I mean,
specific
maybe,
area?
yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I need to look up what that was called, of like when you can call and sort of get quote business assistance, but I think it's so limited. And I think that having that be or like beefed up seems like a good thing. I mean, I guess this crisis will pass and maybe the need will be less, but you know, again, in my work life, I've worked with hundreds on their stuff with like the different assistance programs. And I felt like they really should have been able to get some help from SBS, but I think SBS isn't particularly well funded.
Okay, I'm gonna let Sally chime in here and then a request of the word wizards. Go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, if you just change the first one on capital to infrastructure and business subsidies to support small businesses, wouldn't that include what Debbie is talking about?
Well, I'm saying something specific to SBS, like the sort of most relevant agency to this to the business development committee. Like we don't ask much of SBS or, you know, maybe expect much. And maybe I think that's just sort of an opportunity. You know, I mean, because I think that the one you just read out sort of goes to the substance of loan programs. Because remember, New York City did have through SBS a limited loan program like during the pandemic, and it was like $150 and it was gone in a day and no businesses were able to access it. So right. You know, that seems to be what that one is getting at, maybe. I don't know. But
hold on, let me have Steve. Sorry, Sally. Let me just have Steve, who had his hand up. And that way we can get to this point. Go ahead, Sally. I mean, Steve, sorry.
I just feel, I think, a little uneasy using the word subsidies, but maybe it's not such an issue. I was thinking it would sound better if we said grants and loans instead of subsidies.
Perfect.
But it's not a big issue. I mean,
okay. Francisco, can you let us know if you based on the spirit of the discussion that your committee had, if that language, grants and loans, would better fit?
We didn't speak on that per se. We didn't see an issue with the language as it stands.
Okay. And then so I'm gonna have as a task for you to get back to us on number 73. Debbie, if you have any thoughts about crafting around increased funding to SBS ... then that's something that we could definitely add in the new added projects.
Okay, yeah, let me do a little digging because it's come to my attention like maybe SBS is a little bit like doesn't have their own budget or something. But yeah, let me and I'll put it in front of Francisco first, see if he jives with where I was going with that.
Okay, great. Actually, we're going right back to you for traffic and transportation. I wanted to highlight that Maggie Clark has a number of items in the Q&A relevant to your committee's list. So we've been doing 5 minutes and starting with capital and then expense. Also, Jo Mari Smith and the tenants from 174th Street were present earlier this evening.
Oh, that's great.
So they gave context on the issue.
So it was exciting. So you guys have heard that, and I'm sorry that I was so late this evening. It was, I think, sort of interesting for the committee this year, for the first time to have some projects on our list that came from the community. And this was the best example of that. So I won't belabor it because it sounds like you had the benefit of hearing it from Ms. Smith herself. And so we were, again, it sort of made it more alive because as many of the chairs have noted tonight, I think in the short time I've been here, sometimes we have these things that go from year to year and they kind of forget that, you know, what they're connected to. And the second one on our list, the same thing can be said. We had a community member in particular who took a lot of leadership on issues there. They had a petition with a whole bunch of signatures and people who are concerned about this little, you know, that little upper roadway. And they can really get jammed up there because it's so narrow and you're kind of, you know, tucked away up there. So that's our number 2. And everything else. Okay. And then I think, imagine you've already touched upon the new lighting issues, and then everything else is sort of carryovers. Yeah. Although we have had a little progress on the ADA side, but you know, always a long way to go. So that's capital. And then expense, fair fares program, something that we brought into our budget process, I think just 1 year ago. You know, we always are sort of ever hopeful that maybe we could make a little progress with, you know, what a situation and congestion and all of that on 207th Street. And again, I think I would hope that you guys touched upon the added item, again, that new for us this year about calling out the lighting in CB12 parks, because that in fact is not under parks, it's under DOD. So here it is. So that's it.
Sorry, I wasn't muted. I'm going to take the question first from Maggie because she was waiting a while to discuss traffic. So 2 minutes for Maggie, and then we're going to go to Maria.
And I'm sorry, which question? The hump? What?
No, not the hump. I think there's a wrong pause. Maggie, can you?
Well, yeah, I'm here. Well, yeah, I did suggest about speed humps, and somebody's got to ask for it because apparently even the NYPD has been asking for speed humps on Dyckman Street, and somebody is telling them no. So, you know, this is a political football and it needs to stop. I had earlier, before you got here, talked about the idea of finishing the Greenway. And there was talk that it should have been on the list for transportation, but apparently it is not. The Greenway on the west side that goes south from Dyckman Street and ends up in the middle of nowhere where it should really go all the way to the lighthouse. Likewise, you know, Dave Tom had been here a couple times with me talking about piloting taking the left lane of the northbound Henry Hudson for the use for bikes. And I don't see that here. Already the Brooklyn Bridge has an inbound lane given to bicycles, and that was much more busy a roadway than the Henry Hudson is above about 180th Street. Below that, it's 2 lanes. In my neighborhood, it's 3 lanes, and it's and up in the Bronx, it goes back to 2. So there is spare laneage, if you will. So that's a second thing. And I'd had other issues, which I've had my hand up for a very long time to talk about, the NYPD needing to clear the streets of the illegal bikes. I see nothing in the public safety section about that. You know, I fear for my safety on the sidewalk and in the street with these gangs of bikes. You know, we're talking the illegal ones. And I don't understand, it doesn't seem like that's in any of the priorities at all for the community board, and it's a really big deal up here.
I welcome you to come to our committee meeting.
Okay.
You mean that you haven't heard that people up here are unhappy with the people riding illegal bikes up here?
Maggie, sorry, real quick. Just because of time, and there's a number of hands on it as well. But because we focus, there's many needs, but this is really focused on budget and funding for specific initiatives. And I do know that public safety, at least particularly when I was on there, discussed heavily every month around the bikes, and it was never alluded that it was a funding issue, but more of an enforcement issue, which is likely the reason why it's not here tonight.
Well, they
But I'm
don't
not
have
speaking for
enough
public
cops.
safety.
They don't have
Okay.
enough cops, so that is a
So-
funding issue.
So I'm gonna let Debbie go, and then I'm gonna have to take a number.
There
of
was
hands.
one other issue that I pointed out that needs to be corrected in the decibel meters. You can have all the decibel meters you want, but if you have no calibration units, the data is not going to be very useful. So I
Okay.
suggest you change that to add some calibration units, and that there actually be a report on how they're being used, because I don't trust that they are going to use them.
Okay. Well, that'd be great space for follow-up in the committee. Thank you, Maggie. Debbie, you were gonna say something, and then we're gonna take hands.
Yeah, I just, I mean, Maggie describes a lot of really sensational projects, and some of which, like, have been considered by the committee, but that sort of they don't necessarily come here. I mean, those are very multi-million-dollar thing. They're not for this particular budget process. And also, I mean, this process also works better. And I'm not saying most of our projects don't have a completely tight relationship in this way, but in the best case scenario, you have stuff that is a project that's sitting on your agency side, and you are then expressing your support for it. It works far less well when it's not even a glimmer in the eye of your agency, and you're just putting it on the piece of paper, because it's sort of, then there's nowhere for it to go. It's like a handshake without, with one hand. So something like the Greenway that would, God willing, someday get built but that's federal funds. That's not this little poopsie little city budget, as I understand it. So it's not ignoring those things. It's just saying this wasn't the sort of vehicle for it. All right, but I know we have a lot of.
I'm gonna start with Maria.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Debbie, let me just, this is going to be an address to the new members of the community board, so they can, be involved, not the same people, Steve Simon, Maria Luna, and Lisa, and everybody else. Debbie, yesterday morning, the people who presented a study for the Upper Riverside Drive, 157th Street or to 165th Street, met. We did a walk together with Al Taylor, our assemblyman, Sean Abreu, soon to be a city council person,
Yes.
Monica Helper, and about 15 members of the residents of the area, stressing the needs to get that area redone. I mean, you cannot walk around there. The traffic is really poor. We need to push for that items to be taken care as the same as the street, the 174th Street, that sinking hole that they have there. But more important also for us that live on the lower part, the reconstruction of the study to make sure that they do the subway station, the number 1 train, 157th Street, that must be done. It's a high priority. Now the winter comes, the snow melts, and we're going to have another swimming pool on that subway station. So I urge everybody to rank those very highly in order to be taking care of those problems. Thank you so much.
Okay. Sally was next. Sally? All right, I'm gonna.
Regarding lighting in the parks, Sky Pape referred to a meeting that was held with, quite a few parks groups, and there was opposition to more lighting in Inwood Hill Park, especially in the forest, noting that the biggest safety concerns were incidents occurring during daylight hours, and lighting would draw undesirable activity into the park after sundown. In fact, in that meeting, Jennifer Hoppe noted that August Heckscher, after he was Parks Commissioner, concluded that installing the lights in Inwood Hill Park was one of his biggest regrets as Parks Commissioner. So I want to make sure that when you're asking for parks, it's non-natural areas. When you're asking for lighting, I mean, it's non-natural areas because it's destructive to the environment.
Okay. Thank you, Liz.
And Liz, maybe if you can, since this is that was a little bit more your item, if you can also just take those, Sally.
Yes. I am trying to do that. Yes. So we are aware of that, and for all of the reasons that Sally so clearly stated, the lighting issue is not in the natural areas, but in the built areas like playgrounds and courts and such like that. I do also, but yes, Sally, you are absolutely correct. But I did also want to say to Maggie's point regarding the Greenway, to be clear, the project that you have described is known as the Lighthouse Link. And that project is one of the Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee's ranked items. It wasn't ranked very high. I personally would have liked to have seen it get a higher ranking, and I encourage my colleagues to give it a high ranking. But to be clear, the Greenway, what Maggie is identifying as the Greenway continuation, so there's that 1.25 mile pathway that starts at Dykeman Street and goes south to a little turnaround, and then you come back. It doesn't go any further than that 1.25 miles, and we would love to see it continue all the way down to the lighthouse where it picks up with the rest of the bike path. That is an important project. It is a valuable project. And to be clear, it is a project that has its own line, and I welcome my colleagues to rank it. So please stop saying it's not on there. It is on there. It is on there. I do not know how to be any more clear than that.
Thank you for the clarity. We have, hold on, Debbie.
Just so I'm clear, and I'm sorry, Liz, that I didn't see that. Is that the water level link, the build?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Steve.
And it's like $6 million. It's a substantial project.
It's far more than 6 million. I don't have the number handy, but it's way up there. But it is a very important project, and we would like to see it done. I have 2 quick points. Number one, I want to agree with Maria Luna about the urgency in seeing some work done to rehabilitate the 157th Street subway station. Just a few months ago, during one of our storms, it literally was a lake. It was impassable. The water was so high, you could not get down the steps and in the subway station. So something needs to be done to deal with that issue. And Debbie, the line about fair fares looks as though there's some language missing. The sentence isn't completed.
Ooh.
Yeah, there were quite a few typos throughout the document.
That's weird. Let me just pull that up, what that was. Thanks.
All right, so in the meantime, Tanya, Sally, and we're gonna wrap up and move on.
Yeah, getting back to bikes and I'm talking about illegal bikes. I see that one of the lines in the capital is of fund the traffic study for a particular area. Why hasn't DOT funded why can't we ask them to fund a study on the impact of the bikes on our traffic, on our pedestrians? I do think that it is an area that needs to be dealt with. as because we've had incidents, we've had injuries, we've had other things that have taken place as a result of that. And I think that it would be appropriate to study the impact of that on our streets. I've seen dangerous behaviors. They would run up on sidewalks. They, almost cause accidents in the streets. So there is definitely an impact in our traffic, in our pedestrians, and I'm wondering why we can't make that an item, an ask for the capital to fund a study on that.
I'm sorry, to fund a study on bikes.
On the impact of illegal bike activity on our roadways, our streets, and on our pedestrian traffic
Yeah. Oh, I
in
see
the
what you mean.
community.
Yeah, no, they don't like the thing with like if something's like law enforcement related, like that's not how they do. Like their studies would be like yeah, it wouldn't be around the sort of illegality. Once you introduce the illegality, then they're just like, okay, that's an enforcement issue. So that's not the way their traffic studies would work. Like you'd bring in bikes, but more just like, oh, there was this. They also work by a geography. They'd say like, oh, we're studying this geography, and then they'd bring in everything, right? Like pedestrian, bike, car, whatever. But it doesn't really, it's not the way that their traffic studies would work. The traffic studies start with like, oh, that section, that geography needs to be studied.
Is there a reason for that? Because I think that maybe, I mean, again, I'm not telling agents how to work together, but it would seem that perhaps that would be an area in which you all could work with them. And because even if something is illegal, it's still having traffic and pedestrian impacts in our community.
It doesn't. The minute you get into something it sort of can be enforced or not enforced, that's not, they're responsible for if a street is congested, if there are serious injuries and fatalities, then they study a street, but they don't go after one, like, you know what I mean? Like but the minute you're trying to get at a public safety issue via the street, and it just kind of doesn't, that's not how their studies work. And it's just not how it is. I mean, I take the point, but
I just think it's just a lack of accountability. And I think that somehow in our budgets, we should be dealing with that. We should be talking about that. And we should be dealing with that.
Data collection.
We should be looking at data. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, there is data collection though. And you've seen this, is that if there is an injury or a fatality, it'll indicate, was that car, bike, person, car, right?
Right.
So that is captured, and it's captured by location.
Okay.
So that they definitely, and they use that data for sure.
Okay.
So I think that would be, but I'm not aware that there's any problem with like that data is just like that's just gets collected.
Okay. I have to move on to the next hand,
Okay.
which is Sally.
All right. Sorry if I'm shifting around just because I have to plug in or I'm going to lose you.
Just quickly in the lighting again, if you could put in a plug for solar lighting, given that we want to be environmentally friendly. And then following up on what Tanya said, is there a way to do a traffic study of alternate forms of transportation, like the need for protected bike lanes, the need for ways to accommodate all these new ways that people are commuting that don't happen to involve cars? So that could probably bring in some of what Tanya is concerned about.
I mean, they have policy about encouraging, like their commitment to an expanded bike network and their tool of their preference of I'm not sure what we're telling them. Like, that's not it should be like a project that has a reasonable amount of time of like, that's going to be taken on. Like if we sort of say we want their policy to be different or the same or more of it, I think there's a better way to communicate it than putting it in this budget, which if it doesn't, again, relate to anything that's That's not how, like, they have policy. The policy is actually in favor of making our streets accommodate alternatives to cars, protected bike lanes where you can, et cetera, et cetera. So like, do you know what I mean? Like if we think that there's a project that's not happening that could use a little push, or if we decide like, oh, their policy is actually not what we'd like to see, then we would do a resolution on it. But I'm not, you know, this I'd like to me needs to stay with like the way they operate. Like we can't tell them like, oh, you should have a completely different way of putting your policy together. Like then go work there and change how they do. You know what I mean? Like it's
Okay,
not
I guess my
budget process.
concern was that people riding bicycles and other things on the sidewalks because they don't feel safe on those streets commuting in anything but a car. So I didn't know how to address that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I would, yeah, no, I hear you, but I think like they're also trying to make it safer for bikes, you know, generally, like there's not like a deficit there that, but I mean, it's actually a good point. I mean, if we want to add something, because I think there is a limitation generally on the budget for bike lanes. So we could put that in on a new item, I guess.
That would be great.
And then just coming back to the solar, is there a way, if Liz is comfortable with it, to just add into what's already there for park lighting with something like with preference for solar without making it a new item? Is that possible, Kathy?
Liz, Liz is the one that's brought it up for the committee. Liz, are you cool with that? The suggestion was for solar lighting.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. I 100% support that. That is consistent with what we've discussed. We've talked about solar lighting and a preference for solar lighting. So that completely makes sense. And frankly, since the areas that we're talking about needing more lighting are areas that don't have tree canopy, like that makes sense. So yes, thank you.
All right, great.
And thank you,
That one at
Sally,
least on
as
the screen.
always, for being on top of this stuff.
All right, everybody. It is 9:01.
I'm actually going to have to hop off.
That's okay, because we're wrapping up with next steps and there's plenty of them.
Perfect.
So first of all, thank you everybody for your patience, for your contributions this evening, particularly for members of the public who were able to chime in. There are a lot of edits on this list that unfortunately, due to the nature of tonight's facilitation, I couldn't do it on the screen. And we would have been able to have had a final list for tonight. So Ebenezer's on this call, as is Chanel. There are chairs such as Francisco, Domingo, Faye. I think those are the main three who have some homework to get back to me on language. I made note of each and every one of the suggestions. So I'm gonna send these over to Ebenezer and Chanel so that this list can be edited. So tonight, please don't rank these items because it's going to be an inaccurate ranking because items are being struck and shifted and compiled together. And then as folks have highlighted, there's a need there's tons of misspellings that have to get fixed. So this brings me to what should happen is that this is going to be compiled. Everybody will receive a new document. Oops, sorry, let me go back. Wow. All right. Everybody's going to receive a new document. I believe everybody only received it in an Excel version. And we know that, of course, not everybody has Excel or access to Google Sheets. So folks will receive a PDF. I mentioned earlier at the beginning that, we weren't doing the tech because the idea was that this was going to go out tomorrow morning. I'll bring it up to both to the office and Eliezer. And if we can make it a SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, which makes it easier for the office staff, then you should receive that link with instructions. But for sure, everybody's going to get the final version. Forget this evening, it's not this evening. You'll rank expense and capital items separately. So particularly for my new folks, if you're still like with us, paying attention, as you saw, there was at least 75 capital items. I believe there's a little bit more than that on the expense side. So when you see your paper, you're going to rank from number 1 through 75, from highest to lowest, your priorities on the capital side, and then separately, 1 through 50, let's say, on the expense side, right? You can't have 3 number ones. We all know that these are all vital services and needs, and things we want to see. But again, some of you rank them as you see fit based on the conversations that we've had this evening and throughout the year, and what you know as well, right? On that page, traditionally you sign it. You could do that by hand, take a picture of it, submit it, and that's if, again, you prefer to use a printed document. If you do have Excel, and you will be typing in the numbers, then you shoot that. You can initial at the bottom and shoot that in an email to the board office. There are a number of hands. Sorry, I'm going so quickly. I just want to be mindful of time. So I see Maria, Sarah, Steve. Are there any new members or folks who have like, I'm a little lost, I don't know what we're doing? Please raise your hand. I'm going to start with Maria.
I would like to thank you for keeping this in some type of order, but I urge the new members to be careful and to, we didn't have the opportunity to hear from the public, many people from the public to give us their, recommendation. Only few of us that always talk a lot, but I think that we are lacking in having this type of conversation in person. It will be more effective, and we can hear from a lot of more people about their priorities, the priorities of the community. It's not just us as members of the board. But thank you so much for listening to Maria Luna. Good night.
Sally.
Just in terms of the math of this whole thing, I know that at least when we ranked it in the parks, you have to rank every one, because if you don't give something a rank, then it comes in as lower, because number 1 is going to be your big pick and 0 is less than 1. So depending on whether you use SurveyMonkey or how you do it, you need to, either people need to rank 1 through 75, or there needs to be a way to only average the rankings for the number of people that responded, and rank that item, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. You have to rank everything that, even if it's paper or, like last year when we did SurveyMonkey, you still have to rank everything that helps the board office tally. Steve?
Sorry, is it to me now?
Yeah.
I just need to make a statement for the record that while I participated in the discussion tonight, I will not be participating in the ranking because of my conflict of interest working for as an official of the City Parks Department. So I will not be affecting the vote in any way. But certainly I will not be upset if people want to rank parks projects very highly. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar.
Oh, Steve.
I'm also making the same statement as Steve did because of my position at the Department of Education. I will also not be ranking the list, and I share the same sentiments in terms of how you rank in terms of the education proposals. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I don't see any additional hands. Maria, you're right. We had very little few members of the community participate in this meeting. Hopefully next year we're in person and that can improve, and so can our outreach both to board members and community members at large to participate. I hope I'm not being forward by saying this, but the idea was that this was going to go out tomorrow morning, and based off of last year's feedback, folks would submit by Monday afternoon. That way we have some time to marinate, get together, ask any questions if that you may need to. Ebenezer has to submit this, I believe it's on Friday, next Friday. And of course they have to tally, prep, put together. So it's not like a quick thing. So I would say that Monday should still stay as the deadline, 5 p.m. And again, tomorrow you'll receive additional information, instructions. I would say if they're particularly for chairs, if there's items that aren't reflected accurately, please reach out to the board office so we can remedy that. And if you have any questions on to like how to do this process, please reach out, to the office, but also to the executive members, right? Like they're going to be super busy. You have committee chairs that have been around here for 20, 30 years, and you have folks around us that have been here for 4 or 5 years. So, this is the great opportunity to reach out to new members that you may or may not know. So I'm gonna leave it to Francisco, I think, for the last word. Francisco.
Yes, no, I just want to, what we did today, that updated version of stuff that was deleted and live, can we get an updated version of those charts, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So I have what I have, but there's also what you and other folks are gonna be working on in terms of language you accepted, just so it's
Right.
clear. So
Right.
that's gonna be sent to Ebenezer and Chanel, who are working on this project. And then once they receive all of that, and thank you, Ebenezer, receive all of that, then everybody, the entire board gets the full list. So for sure by tomorrow.
Okay,
Go
cool.
ahead,
'Cause I
Ebenezer.
just want to make those edits based on the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating in the meeting tonight. And yes, I would like to receive all the edits by tomorrow as soon as possible in order for us to make the changes and revise the final document that I would like to send it if it's possible tomorrow afternoon or the early Friday morning, so you have all the weekend to review it. And as Catherine said, just submit it to the office no later than Monday at 5 p.m. It takes some time to do the ranking, and I need to have everything ready by the 29th. So I will appreciate your help on this matter. So send me between tonight and tomorrow morning all the changes. One situation that we have in the office all day today, we didn't have internet. Spencer came to the office, tried to fix it, wasn't able to fix it. We don't know if tomorrow we're going to have internet. I will have to do the district service cabinet meeting from my house to make sure that I have internet to do it. So we're going to get back to you as soon as possible, but please help us to get those changes tonight, tomorrow morning, so we can get back to you by Friday. Thank you. Good night.
Mary, and go ahead, and then we'll wrap up.
I just
Sorry,
had,
Sally. Mary, go ahead, Mary.
I had a question about, how we're being sent and how we can print them out, because I was trying to print out what was sent today, what you're putting on screen, Catherine, and I couldn't print it.
Well, we're going to be sending it the Excel version and a PDF that you can print it. Nevertheless, the office is going to have hard copies available if anyone wants to come to pick it up by the office, and also we can leave it on the first floor, so it's going to be easier for anyone who wants to pick it up Friday. And I don't know if they're open on the weekend, but even Monday morning, you can also receive it. But we're going to send two versions, the Excel version, electronic version, and that you can manipulate it and send it to us, or a PDF that you can print it, fix it, do the ranking and send it back to us, or bring it to the office if you're not able to scan it and send it back to us.
Right, because I can't do that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mary. And again, if folks need alternative plans,
Okay.
just reach out as well. So it is 9:12. I want to thank everybody again for your participation and patience. We had a robust conversation of over 100 items. And I think this is always a cool way to kind of hear what the patterns are in other committees that we're not always privy to, because we usually serve on 2 committees in the general meeting. So I'd like to call this meeting for adjournment.
So move. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Catherine. Good
Kathy,
job.
thank you so much for your leadership on this. This is great.
I'm here. Thank y'all. Enjoy the night.
Great job, Catherine.